Hi everybody, this is the third video in our little series on addictions. And you'll remember, well, in the last two videos, we talked about tolerance and withdrawal and homeostasis. And in this video, I want us to talk about craving and some components of the cycle of addiction. I don't think we'll talk about the entire cycle in this one video. So what we haven't talked about, so we talked about tolerance and withdrawal. We have not yet talked about craving, and that is one of the three components of addiction. One way to think about it is that tolerance and withdrawal are the physical manifestations of addiction, and craving is the psychological manifestation. So you might say to yourself, oh, that's just psychological, with a little just in front of the word psychological, right? As though that was somehow lesser than the physical manifestations. And let me tell you that the problem with addiction is craving. The problem with addiction is psychological. Tolerance and withdrawal we can deal with. So let me give you an example. Let's say we took somebody who was addicted to heroin, completely addicted to heroin, like really bad. And we lock them in a hospital and we completely detox them and withdraw them from heroin. We get their body back in balance. They're nourished and hydrated, and they're in great shape and in beautiful homeostasis. You could do that. You could do that. In 2 months, you would definitely be done, right? Person's back in balance, back in homeostasis, completely healthy. Now you release them from the hospital. And what do you think they're going to do? In all likelihood, they're going to use again. If the addiction wasn't addressed, if it was only addressed medically, it's pretty likely that they will use again. Now, why would anybody do that? If the opiates, if the addiction was destroying their life, and you got them off of the drug physically, how could anybody be so dumb as to go back and use again, right? Well, it's not about smart or dumb. It's about craving and obsession. And if you think that they're just psychological, then you really don't understand addiction. So let's talk a little bit about the cycle of addiction, and that will help us understand craving to some extent. So in 1989, a guy named Patrick Carnes, Carnes, came out with a book called Out of the Shadow. And this book was actually about sex addiction. It was the first reputable book that was for both clinicians and addicts about sex addiction. And in it, he came up with this idea, with this cycle of addiction. So don't just Google it. If you Google it, there's all kinds of stuff. This is very particular to his work. And even though he wrote about sex addiction, it turns out that it's so valuable. It's such a good model that when I worked in 28-day treatment, we used it. And it's very helpful to work with clients using this model also, because it's very easy to understand. And it kind of hits home. So we're talking about craving and the cycle of addiction. So when we talk about craving, everybody knows what it means to crave. I mean, you've been hungry. You've been thirsty. That's it. You know what craving is. And then you know the more subtle forms of craving, where you really feel like a piece of chocolate, or you really feel like something salty. So that's a unique kind of craving, right? And it's hard to explain if you haven't been there. But once you've been there, you know that it is this almost physical feeling of wanting something. So I'm going to give you a scenario. And let's see if this can help you with the cycle of addiction. And let's say, so I'm going to assume that most of us, almost all of us, have at some point tried to modify our diets, right? Maybe you wanted to lose 5, 10, 20 pounds. Maybe you just wanted to cut junk out of your diet in order to be healthier. So let's say that you decide to go on a diet and you decide that you want to lose 15 pounds. And you're going to do it in a really reasonable, sensible way. You're just going to cut sweets and junk out of your diet. You know, mostly like cake and candy and sodas and, you know, other junk like that. But otherwise, you're going to eat normally. And you're doing a great job. You know, you've been on your diet for like 3 months and you've lost, I don't know, 10 pounds. Maybe you've got 5 pounds to go. And you're pretty pleased with yourself, and you're, you know, doing it real healthy. When you want a snack, you eat like those little baby carrots or rice cakes, and you're great. And it is your partner's birthday. And you decide that for your partner's birthday, you're going to make your specialty, which is German chocolate cake. They just love your German chocolate cake. So you go to the store, you get all the ingredients, you come home, you do your magic with your stirring and your whirring and, you know, and got all the stuff going, and put it in the oven, and the house fills with the smell of the chocolate cake. And you know what? You are so good, you don't even lick that spoon. You're great. So then it's time for the party, and friends come over, and birthday to you, birthday, yeah, blow out the candles, and friends go home. And that was quick, I know. And now you're left with about 1/3 of the cake. And your partner goes to sleep, and you put this 1/3 of the cake that you have left in the nice cake Tupperware that you have, and you pop that in the fridge and you go to sleep. All is good. You haven't touched that cake. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you wake up and you decide to go to the kitchen and get yourself a glass of milk. And you go to the fridge, you open it, you reach for the milk, and you see the cake. And you pull it out of the fridge just to look at it, right? And as you take the lid off, you notice that there are some chunks of icing and cake kind of lying around on the platter. And you pick one up and you pop it in your mouth. And it just explodes. It is so good. So you start cleaning up those little chunks, you know. Once you've done that, you realize that the last person who cut the cake didn't cut it quite straight. So you decide to just straighten it out a little bit, and you eat, you know, the part that was crooked. Then you think to yourself, you know what, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm an adult. People eat cake. Normal people eat cake. I can have a piece of cake. I'm going to pour my glass of milk and put a piece of cake on a plate and eat it with a fork, just like a person. And you do that. You do that. And when you finish that piece of cake, you realize that you've blown your diet. And it's really good. And you think, you know what the heck? Tomorrow is once again a desert of baby carrots and rice cakes. And you don't want to face that cake in the morning. So you go ahead and polish it off. You just eat the whole thing, everything that's left. And in the end, you feel pretty awful about yourself, ashamed, bummed because you've ruined your diet. And thinking, what are you going to tell your partner in the morning when the cake is all gone? I mean, they thought it was cake for breakfast day, and now there's no cake. And yeah, ashamed and maybe a little nauseous and disappointed in yourself, you go to bed. So I'm going to wrap up this video here, and in the next video, we're going to apply this scenario to the cycle of addiction. Okay.